Alrighty, let's kick things off. Hi there, my name is Ali Bazanga and I'm the marketing generalist at Upwave. Thank you so much for taking the time to join our webinar this afternoon or morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Today's topic will be on the tough questions you need to ask your brand lift partner, hosted by Upwave's VP of Product, Ken Archer. The session will be approximately 45 minutes long with time left over to answer any questions. Please feel free to utilize the Q&A function to pose any questions that may come up during the session. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Ken Archer.
Thanks, Ali. So today we're going to be talking about what are the tough questions that you should be asking your brand lift partner. Ad effectiveness measurement is complicated. Anyone who tells you that, oh, it's simple, is not being fully truthful. It is legitimately complicated. And it can be really challenging when you are an advertiser or an agency. You have a fiduciary responsibility to know what questions to ask for such a complicated product, particularly given the legitimate suspicion that you may have that you're being hand waved away when you ask tough questions. Having sold ad tech for a long time, I can tell you that all ad tech companies, when they're faced with tough questions, always inclined to kind of hand wave away to some extent. And so it's important to know where are the skeletons? What are the tough questions that I need to really press on? Whether I'm looking into lower funnel ad effectiveness measurement, like with MTA, or upper funnel with brand lift measurement. So today I'm going to pull back the kimono and tell you where the bodies are in brand lift companies. So in particular, this is important for you if you are purchasing brand lift measurement because you want to actually make decisions based on it. Right. So if you need to understand brand lift by particular tactics, media tactics, frequency, creative tactics, and that's because you're going to optimize to those tactics, or maybe not, you're not going to optimize mid-campaign, but you're going to use them to better plan the next campaign. So, there's people who are just checking a box sometimes when they buy brand lift. And if you're just checking a box, but the results don't really matter, well, then this isn't really as relevant, right? Knowing what are the tough questions to ask. But if you're going to make decisions with your client's money based on the results, optimization or planning, well, then it's important to know what tough questions to ask. And it can also be challenging, if you don't have a math background. Just to be honest, I don't have a math background. I was a political philosophy major in college. In my experience, most people in advertising don't have a math background, and they have had to learn this stuff on the job. And so that can make it even more intimidating to ask the tough questions. And so I can relate to those of you who, who have had to pick this stuff up on the job to be able to ask, data scientists at measurement companies questions about their products. So just to dive straight into it, here are the two tough questions that are particularly relevant for the math that is done in brand lift. The first is, I pay for mid-campaign reads, but when I look at my dashboard, I see that I'm getting daily dashboard updates. Are those daily dashboard updates the same as the mid-campaign reads that I'm receiving? Right? So that's an important question to ask. Brand lift companies, at this point, they pretty much all have dashboards that appear to update on a daily basis. Yet they also have the ability, they offer you to purchase a mid-campaign read. Well, it's important to ask, what's the difference here? If I'm getting a dashboard that's updated every day, why do I have to pay something else to also get an update in the middle of the campaign? The second question is this: I need reads for media and creative tactics and for frequency. Do these have cut level controls do you have cut level controls available for each of these, right? And so when you look at brand lift reporting, like overall or for gender or for age, you'll generally see an exposed and a control, for every gender or for every age bucket. But when you look at media tactics or creative tactics or frequency, you suspiciously don't see that. And so why is that? So if you've noticed either of these two things that I'm pointing out, and it just seemed a little odd and you weren't sure, should I ask about this? The answer is a resounding yes. Yes, you absolutely should ask about these two things because these are little windows into some weaknesses into the math that has been used for brand lift measurement for a long time. And I'm going to dive into that in more detail. So now, when you ask these questions, you obviously won't be the first person who's asked these questions of brand lift companies, and you're likely to get a hand-waved answer, as ad tech salespeople are skilled at providing. So if you ask, what's the difference between the dashboard and the mid-campaign reads? The answer is generally, well, the dashboard is just reweighted nightly. But a mid-campaign read, that's just more of a full remodel of of your results. But it's all valid. And so that's kind of a hand wave. And I'm going to go into more detail what's going on there in this presentation. The second question, if you ask, why do I get cut level controls for age and gender, but I don't for like audience or creative message or frequency? The answer you're likely to get is, well, in those cases, our data science team has determined that the overall controls are sufficient for calculating lift. And the fact that you're in this webinar right now indicates that you have a good BS meter when you are talking to ad tech companies, and your BS meter should be going off when you get either of these two hand-waved answers. Let me first tell you what Upwave's answers are to these two questions, and then go into some detail about why this matters. So if you were to ask an Upwave salesperson, are daily updates the same as the mid-campaign reads I typically receive? The answer is yes. Upwave delivers both. In fact, we don't have a product called mid-campaign reads. We have nothing to buy there. We just have the dashboard. Because your suspicion is right. Why would you have both? So we actually overcome some limitations in the math that traditional brand lift companies have had that has required them to have both. And that enables us to have something that we call daily automated reads. It's possible thanks to our use of causal machine learning. All right, so I'll go into that in a little more detail in a minute. And then if you were to ask a Upwave salesperson, can I get cut level controls for each media and creative tactic, each frequency bucket? The answer is yes. We use causal machine learning, and that enables us to generate a control for every single media and creative tactic, really any tactic that you can map to a placement ID or a creative ID, right, on an ad. So now let me go into a little more detail on what's going on here. What is the impact of these two kind of weaknesses in the math that's been used historically? All right, so first we'll talk about daily automated reads. So just to zoom out a little bit, the way brand lift works is that we measure the attitudes of those who are exposed to an ad. Then we measure the attitude of those who are not exposed to the ad. Well, if we can't just report those raw results, right? Because then we would generally show double-digit lift in attitudes, because those who are exposed to the ad are targeted, whereas those who are not exposed to the ad are not targeted. So those who are targeted for a reason. They're in a first-party audience, a third-party audience, a particular publisher that has an audience that has an interest in this product category. And so they are already going to be predisposed to be aware of your brand, to be favorable towards your brand, than just random people who are not exposed to your ad. So that's why you have to weight the control and the exposed. You have to so that they are balanced, right? So that they are a match, because we are trying to simulate a randomized controlled trial in an environment where we cannot have a randomized holdout group. So that being said, how does this work? This weighting, creating this synthetic control group. Well, when you weight, you have to weight based on particular features. All right, so you look at certain features of the exposed group, like their age or their gender, their income, right? Or it can be something, a custom features particular to the brand, like if it is an ad for cat litter, you may want to know are the people who are exposed, do they own cats? And then you would want the non-exposed group to be up-weighted or down-weighted, so that they resemble, they're a match of the exposed group against these features. So there's two things going on here when you do your weighting. First is selecting which features to weight on, and second is calculating the right weights. So it's really important to keep in mind those two steps to doing brand lift measurement. First, selecting the features to weight on, and the second is calculating the right weights for each feature. Legacy brand lift measurement, when you request an interim read, that is the only time that they ask the question, what features should we weight on? In the dashboard on a daily basis, they're not asking that question. They're just updating the weights within those features. So let's say after at the beginning of the campaign, they don't have a lot of data. And so a brand lift company will generally start with just a couple features, like 2 genders and maybe 3 age buckets, and that's it. And then they will re-weight within those features, but not ask again, okay, do we have enough data that we should add more features? Until you request and pay for a mid-campaign read. Only at that point are you getting a new set of features. That's why when you look at your dashboard day to day, it will change just a little bit. And then let's say a month into the campaign, you request a mid-campaign read. Well, suddenly on that day, your dashboard will change dramatically, your results, raising the question, hold it, what am I supposed to be looking at here? The dashboard or this daily automated or this mid-campaign read you just sent me, right? Well, what's going on is it's only at that time that they are asking the question, what features should I weight on? So that creates a real problem, right? If you're using these numbers to make optimization decisions, you realize that, hold on, I can't use this dashboard to make optimization decisions. In fact, if I want to make any optimization decisions, I have to do it only when I get this mid-campaign reads, which I have to pay extra for. And I have to ignore the dashboard because that will mislead me. So, in this example, this here on this slide, this is our demo brand that we use to illustrate different brand lift concepts. A challenger laundry detergent brand called Flower Fresh runs an ad campaign to drive awareness. The Upwave dashboard reveals that CTV is outperforming mobile and pre-roll video, reveals that pretty early in the campaign. The dashboard from a legacy partner is based on an out-of-date set of weighted features and can't be acted upon. But by using this Upwave dashboard, which provides you daily automated reads where you don't even pay for a mid-campaign read, a programmatic team was able to optimize budget allocation based on these nightly model updates in the Upwave dashboard. All right, so that's the first kind of skeleton in the closet of brand lift math. And the reason why we were able to do this is because we have automated this process where we're actually training a model using machine learning rather than manually doing this weighting. If you manually do the weighting, that's why you can't do it every night. And that's what legacy research companies that do brand lift, how they're doing it. All right, on to the second area. So cut level controls. Why is it important to get cut level controls? So let's say that you are using your Brandwidth vendor to pick the right frequency. And a couple weeks into the campaign, you look in your dashboard or you get a mid-campaign read. And this report, this chart here is what you get. Should you, based on this, increase your frequency to 10 plus? That appears to be where you get the most lift. Well, if you go just based on this chart, the answer would be yes, but I can tell you the answer is a resounding no. You absolutely should not do that because all that will do is dramatically reduce the reach of your campaign for no reason. The reason why this is misleading is because this uses an overall control. All right, so if you're using a legacy kind of research panel-based Brandwidth company, I guarantee you this is what you're going to see on frequency, where you're going to see people with zero frequency are the control, and then you have exposed groups for in every other frequency bucket, but you don't have separate controls specific to those frequency buckets. Now, why would you want that? Well, the reason why you would want that is because in digital advertising, the people with the most frequency on a campaign tend to be the people who spend the most time online, right? And the people who spend the most time online tend to be younger people. So all of this chart is really telling you is whether young people are predisposed to be more aware of your brand. So if your brand is, popular with young people, then this is always what you're going to see in this chart, and it's going to lead you to recommend much higher frequency caps that actually hurt the performance of your campaign because it limits its reach, thus dramatically limiting the actual impact of the campaign. Right? So what do you want instead? What you want instead is cut level controls, right? Controls for every frequency bucket. By having a control specific to every frequency bucket, you are controlling for the fact that people who see more impressions are likely to be younger people, right? So the control for the higher frequency buckets is going to upweight people who are younger, so that they are a match for those who are exposed to that many impressions in the campaign. So what we find when we have in our frequency Brandwidth reporting in our dashboard is that we generally find like a sweet spot of frequency that you are less likely to see with legacy Brandwidth companies that generally don't show you a sweet spot. They generally show it going up and up and up if your brand caters to young people that spend more time online, or simply being flat if it does not. Okay. So audience is another really good example where you have to have cut level controls. Why? Well, what's the main distinction in audiences? It's between first party and third party audiences. Which one is likely to be more aware of your brand? Well, obviously a first party audience is going to be more aware of your brand than a third party audience, right? And so you can't use an overall control and apply it to your first party audience and to your third party audience. You have to have a cut level control, just like when you look at age and gender cuts for Brandwidth. You have cut level controls for those. In the same way with first and third party audiences, you want to have a cut level control specific to every audience. And that's what this looks like, right? When we report audience, we generate, the gray bar is the control and it's specific to every audience. And then the last one I'll talk about is creative. So creative also has to have cut level controls. Traditionally, it does not. The problem that's created here is that I have yet to see a brand campaign where everyone saw the same creatives, where there was zero creative targeting happening. Because creatives are exposed to different media targets, well, that means you need to control for the differences in who's being exposed to different creatives. If you want to answer the specific question, how much lift does this creative message drive, regardless of audience, right? Compared to other creative messages, regardless of audience. So in order to get that regardless in there, so that you're actually measuring just the creative message, you have to control for audience. And that means you have to have cut level controls to account for the differences in who's exposed to each creative message. And that's what this looks like, cut level controls. All right, so the fact that you came to this meeting shows that you are already a tough customer who is doing a good job with their fiduciary responsibility to your advertisers, your brands, budget dollars. And so I hope this presentation has been helpful to you, and happy to take any questions. Let's see, Allie, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
We've got one question so far. What are some of the largest differences between panels and Upwave?
Great question. So what I've been talking in this presentation so far has been about the math, the differences in the math between sort of the manual research approach to brand lift and Upwave's approach, which revolves more around machine learning automation. But there's also an important difference when it comes to where the data comes from. So the companies that do like manual weighting are also the companies that rely on panels. And what we've found the massive limitation of panels to be is that they are biased and they are not census representative, right? So in order to do good brand lift measurement, you want to have, you want to be measuring the people who actually cross-section of the people who saw the campaign. Well, folks in panels, because they are incentivized with cash, skew heavily towards those who are more likely to want to make cash on the weekends to supplement their income by filling out mini surveys, right? So it's going to skew demographically towards elderly. It's going to skew demographically towards low income. You know, for some survey purposes, this works. For brand lift measurement, this doesn't work. So it's important to have a census representative data set when you're measuring brand lift. So that's why the Upwave approach, which uses a digital network of thousands of publishers that unlock access to premium content and services with our interview, it gives us access to nearly every household in America. So it's more census representative. Also, because we're not paying people directly, we get more provably truthful answers. With panels, if you run like trap questions, like what was your opinion of the movie The Black Fingerprint that came out this year? Well, there was no movie called The Black Fingerprint that came out this year, but in panels, you often find 5 to 25% of people have an opinion because they're getting paid to have an opinion. Whereas in our approach, with our digital network, generally it's less than 2% because they're not being paid directly.
We've got another one. When you think about cut level controls, what sample sizes do you recommend as a minimum for that cut control?
Excellent question. So I would say that there is no magic minimum sample size. And you know, the math would be a lot easier if there was a magic minimal sample size, but there's not. What is important is that the math that's being done controls for what are called the type 1 and type 2 error rates. You may have heard of false positives and false negatives. Because if it doesn't, then when you look at the data multiple times, you're going to see stuff jumping in and out of statistical significance excessively, right? So it's more important to look at the statistical significance indicator, and even better, the p-value that underlies it, than it is to try to have sort of a magical sample size threshold. For example, we are able to do our daily automated reads because we use a particular approach to not overreacting to new information that comes in. It's called Bayesian information criterion, and it leads to a smoothing of results over time that prevents stuff jumping in and out of stat sig day to day. What we would say is you need to pick a Brandwidth company whose math you find credible and you trust, and then just look at their lift and their significance indicators and go based on that. But if you're trying to come up with a magical sample size threshold like 75 or 120, well, that's kind of a reflection of the fact that you don't really trust the math of your Brandwidth company, and you're trying to add a layer of protection, control on top of it.
Next up, we have, is there a place where we can learn more about these value exchange placements and domains, like a list that demonstrates these audiences?
Yes, absolutely. So any Upwave salesperson or customer success manager can give you more information on the Upwave digital network. The digital network is not just the publishers that we measure on. That's sort of completely separate. Someone can be exposed to an ad on one inventory, one publisher, and we interview them on a different publisher in our digital network. But it is a range of like high quality mobile and browser-based publishers.
All right. How can I use brand lift and audience data in tandem to make my campaign results stronger?
Excellent question. So we find that different brand campaigns have different objectives when it comes to brand lift versus audience targeting. There's one category of brand campaigns are just trying to drive brand lift. They don't really care where it comes from. The only relevance of audience targeting is they have a pretty good idea of what audiences are going to be more persuadable to their message. But at the end of the day, they sell to everybody, and so they just want brand lift. A second category of brand campaigns only care about brand lift when it's from a particular audience, because people outside of that audience are not valid customers. They have an opinion that no one outside of that audience, maybe based on some research they've done, will buy their product to any meaningful degree. So they only care about brand lift within a particular audience. So in that case, they both matter. They want to know brand lift within that audience. And then there's a third category of brand campaigns, a final one, where all they really care about is audience targeting. They want to know that they're reaching this audience and that they are penetrating it. And brand lift is kind of a sort of a secondary concern. So what's important is to understand which of those three you're in for a particular brand campaign. And so sometimes that requires clarifying with the brand, what is the intended outcome of this campaign. What's unique about Upwave is that we enable you to measure accuracy of a brand and a campaign and its tactics, regardless of which of these three buckets your brand campaign is in, because we show you both brand lift overall and by different audiences, as well as audience targeting accuracy. So we generate an update every night, a demographic and behavioral profile of those who were exposed to the campaign as a whole, as well as individual media tactics like publisher and audience, so that you get a full 360-degree view of every media tactic, both how much brand lift it's driving, how much brand lift it's driving within the target audience, and how accurate it is in reaching that target audience.
All right, last one. Do you utilize lookalike respondents instead of weighting the control group? Also, I lied, there's one more, so stay tuned.
That is a great question. We, as do all brand lift companies, we certainly collect control to match the exposed as well as possible. But in addition to that, it is important to also weight the control so that it is an accurate match to the exposed, particularly in areas where there could be a real skew in the results. So for example, with the cat litter example, you absolutely would want to weight your control group based on cat ownership, right? So it's important that you are getting that your brand lift company understands the targeting of the campaign, and that targeting is being factored into the weighting. You can't just rely on having some match, some sort of pre-existing match between the exposed and the control based on just metadata you have on them outside of the context of the campaign.
All right. How do you know the person exposed at the household level is the same person taking the survey?
Great question. So this gets to a slightly different topic, one around tracking. With all of the privacy changes that are impacting ad targeting, ad effectiveness measurement, Upwave has modified the way that we do tracking in order to be able to continue to provide complete coverage, right? So brand lift measurement approaches that continue to rely either on device IDs for tracking or on emails for tracking, having growing coverage gaps. And these coverage gaps are going to become massive early next year when Apple does not allow the sharing of exposure data by iOS mobile apps keyed against either IDFA or email address for those who have objected to such tracking. We, however, will be able to continue to track ad exposures on that inventory and all other inventory on the open internet, because we actually track at the household level now rather than the device level or the email level. The way we handle that in our ad measurement is that after we measure brand lift at the household level, we then rescale the results based on the probability of exposure in aggregate for those who are in exposed households, for respondents in exposed households. How we calculate that and how we've sort of calibrated and validated that approach is going to be the subject of a white paper that we are coming out with here in a week or two. So check with your Upwave salesperson or CSM, or monitor our website, and you'll see that come out.
Thank you, Ken. Any other last questions before we sign off? Going once, going twice. All right. Thank you again for joining us. We hope to see you at Upwave's next webinar, and please keep an eye on your inboxes as this recording will be sent to you along with the white paper. Thanks again for joining.